Hi, okay, so now we're going on to the adrenals. And now the adrenals are associated with the kidneys. In fact, they sit right on top. They're sort of like little fatty caps that are onto the bean of the kidney. So um, they're comprised of two different sections. You have the adrenal cortex, which is the outer area of the adrenal gland, and then the inner area is known as the adrenal medulla. Now, the adrenal cortex and medulla actually produce different types of hormones and secrete them. So, we are going to study them a little bit separate first, okay? So, the adrenal medulla is a really important gland in that it is the response of the sympathetic nervous system. So when the sympathetic nervous system kicks in, again, this is the nervous control system. When they kick in, they're going to actually stimulate the release of epinephrine. Epinephrine is going to be the initial hormone that's being released, and then norepinephrine will kick in after that. Um, Now they're pretty similar in what they do. And again, we talked a little bit about the response that we get in the fight or flight syndrome when we were talking, or fight or flight, yeah, fight or flight syndrome. Anyway, when we were talking about the nervous system, but we're going to get a little bit more into detail with them as well. So what's going to happen is that when epinephrine kicks in, it's going to cause the smooth muscles of the veins to actually contract, and you're going to get vasoconstriction. Again, what's going to happen with that is that it's going to increase your blood pressure so that it's going to help the blood to be pushed faster and more efficiently. Okay. And then what's going to happen is that glucogen, which is stored within the liver, is then going to be converted into glucose. And remember, glucose is a type of energy for the cells. And so once you get an increase in the nutrients or in the fuel, you're going to get an increase in the productivity as well. So you're going to find that some of the cells are going to start working at a much faster rate as opposed to what they were doing before. Okay. So again, you're going to get vasoconstriction, you're going to get glucogen changed into glucose. It's also going to increase your heart rate. So not only is your blood pressure being increased, but also the frequency at which it pumps the blood will also be increased. And then the metabolic rate of some of the cells are actually going to be increased as well. And then what's going to happen is that dilation of the bronchioles are going to take place. And so remember, the bronchioles are the tubes that are actually leading to the lungs. Well, we haven't talked about respiratory system yet, but bronchioles lead to the lungs. And so when those are actually enlarged with not vasodilation, but when the bronchioles are dilated, that means more air is actually going to get into the lungs. It's sort of like driving through a tunnel. I used to, when I lived in Philadelphia, I would drive down to DC sometimes. And when you go down to DC, there are a couple tunnels that you have to pass through while you're in Baltimore. And if you go at the wrong time of day, those tunnels only have 3 lanes. And I mean, it's bad enough in traffic around here, let alone down back east. And so what would happen is basically stop traffic. Now, if they had actually increased it to 4 lanes, that means that a quarter more people could actually drive through, right? So that means we'd actually get more people driving. It's kind of the same way with our bronchioles. The larger the area in which we can intake the air, the more air we're going to get. Makes sense. Anyway, so those are going to be the response of epinephrine. Um, so now what's going to happen is that epinephrine is one of those things that it doesn't break down very quickly. So this is again one of the problems of our our sympathetic nervous system is that it doesn't absorb very quickly, so the effects are going to last quite a bit longer. Again, this is kind of one of the nice things about massage in that we help the body to absorb the hormones. So there are some types that the body should not be absorbing any faster than it already is, for sure. Certain types of chemotherapy, things like certain chemicals or drugs that need to be on a specific time release, it's actually detrimental when they get a massage because it's going to reabsorb too quickly. But in this case, we're actually going to help epinephrine being absorbed quickly into the body, which is much better because it takes a long time for it to be absorbed. Now, epinephrine is going to be the first one to kick in, but to make it last even longer, they're going to have norepinephrine kick in. And this is the one where it actually starts affecting the bronchioles, the blood glucose levels, and then it's also going to, they're going to direct the blood to specific parts of the body so that they're actually going to start making the blood go to the area that it needs to. So it's going to increase blood circulation to the head, to the heart, again to the lungs, because the more blood that's flowing through, the more gas exchange you get. It's also going to send it to some of to the skeletal muscles, because you might need to run faster. So it's probably good that your muscles can work faster and more efficiently and stronger. Whereas it's going to take it away from a lot of the smooth muscle, so it's not going to, so the stomach muscle, for instance, will not get a lot of the nutrients as much as, let's say, the lungs or the heart. So it's specific to help with our physical abilities. Anyway, so that's the two types within the adrenal medulla. So the very center of the adrenal glands are going to deal with the stress syndrome or symptoms. All right. Now, within the adrenal cortex, and again, that's just that outer layer. You can see a good example of that on page 267 in your memoirs. So there's two types of hormones that are released in the medulla, and there's also only two hormones that are going to be released in the cortex. Here we go. Within the cortex, I'm sorry, there's actually three in the cortex. The first one that we're going to come across is something called glucocorticoids. These ones are going to be maintaining the body's carbohydrate reserve by stimulating the liver to conserve amino acids into glucose instead of protein. So what's going to happen is that this hormone is going to take the carbohydrates that we're taking in, and rather than using the fuel of burning the carbohydrates into protein fibers, so helping protein fibers reproduce, it's going to specifically try and instead change it and have it stored in the liver instead. So what's happening is that we're not having our nutrients help to build muscle and bone. Instead, we're just building some reserves. It's going to happen that this hormone is released more in times of stress. Again, the body wants to make sure it's going to have enough fuel for any type of emergency. So if it feels like an emergency is coming on, it would actually start to reserve already rather than fear like it's going to run out. It's sort of like when you start to ration water or foods. So I think rationing water is a great example. I actually grew up in a city called Sparks, which is just right outside of Reno. And Nevada is the driest state in the country. Utah is the second, so way to go us desert people. Anyway, so Nevada being the driest state doesn't get a lot of water in it. And I can remember as a child uh, where we could only turn on our water once a week to water our lawns. Um, this was done kind of late in the summer, but you can imagine that if it had started even earlier in the summer when they realized at the very beginning that we weren't going to get a lot of rain, then we would be a little bit better off later on, so it can continue and sustain itself for a longer period of time until it finally gets more. It's going to be kind of the same thing with the glucocorticoids, in that it feels like if it starts to ration the glucose in the very beginning, then it's not likely to run out when it's really important.